Dear all, welcome to the Gateway House Weekly Webcast. This is episode number 7, and we've brought to you various topics that are of interest in these current times of coronavirus crisis, as well as some which are not directly linked to the crisis, but have long-term implications on India and India's relations with the world. So we welcome you all once again. Today's topic is satellite solutions for India's agriculture. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the government of India has initiated extensive reforms in the agriculture as well as the space sector. The direct reforms include the deregulation of the Essential Commodities Act of 1955, that is poised to transform agriculture and agriculture logistics, enhance supply chains, and a lot has been written about it in the past 1 week, at least in India. But there is another neglected domain that has really given a big boost to India's agriculture. And this is the government's announcement of deregulating the closed geospatial data policy. Now, what the government intends to do is they want to provide geospatial data to private entrepreneurs as well as allow them in a sector that was a government's domain entirely. And they're wanting to provide a level playing field to both the to private sector, big companies, as well as startups. Along with that, they also want to provide predictable regulatory environment. Now, this is a huge change. This is a huge change, and this is a big revolution for India's agriculture as well as the tech sector simultaneously. None of these two sectors were seen or they were seen synchronously. This has opened up vistas for various satellite applications, including surveying and monitoring of agricultural field on a business to government, business to business, as well as business to customer models. For investors who are wanting to invest in the space sector, we are actually not talking Elon Musk. We are talking about a more practical and doable imagery analysis, data analysis, and launch of satellites. This is a big revolution for India's space sector. And to discuss this today, we have two esteemed guests with us. Our first guest is Dr. Marco Bressan. Marco is a veteran of the tech industry. Marco has worked earlier with the Xerox Corporation, one of the biggest European financial entities, the BBVA. And presently, he is the Chief Product Officer and the Chief Data Scientist of the very well-known Argentinian satellite company, Satellogic. Marco, welcome. Our other guest, a very well-known person in India's geospatial sector, Wing Commander Satyam Kushwaha. Wing Commander is a veteran of the Indian Air Force. He's worked in the Air Force for decades. His prime area of interest is geospatial data analysis, and he's done so from both his defense eyes as well as civilian eyes. So I welcome Wing Commander as well. Wing Commander, welcome. Right. We'll start with the questions. And let me start with Wing Commander Satyam Kushwaha. Satyamji, my question for you is, you've seen Indian farmlands from fighter aircrafts as well as through satellites. Now with the liberalization of the geospatial industry, what do you think will be the areas of, or what do you think what will be the areas that will find synergies between the government and the private sector? And do you have any suggestions in terms of what are the areas that the private sector should avoid? What will be the pain points for them?
Okay, very interesting question. To take me back to my fighter flying days. I think as I see the land, you know, Rakesh Sharma, when he went up to this space, he said, "Sare jahan se acha Hindustan mera." So every time I fly in the air, I used to see that this is the best land in the world that you'll ever get. I think every well-meaning Indian will think that way, and probably every citizen of his own country would think it that way. So I see opportunity, and I see a colossal opportunity. and having full faith in the leadership of our present Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji. I feel that he is the man who's in the right chair to do it. Uh, I think that the challenges that we faced earlier were more on the policy and the mindset front rather than the potential front. The potential was always there because India is the best test bed in the world. The kind of diversity in terms of terrain, in terms of people, languages, climatic patterns, soil conditions, the crops grown. There's no reason why India cannot make it big. However, we definitely have had certain setbacks because of kind of natural disasters that we face or variable policies which have been impediment to convergence of information, non-standard IT structures which could be gathering information regarding the agriculture domain in different formats but not converged on a single point platform. And I think the awareness level itself, I mean, imagine I mean, most of the farmers do not even understand what is a satellite. Let's keep the other things aside. So I think, if I recall very correctly, the Prime Minister had said, I think on the 8th of August 2014, there was a major seminar. I may be getting the date wrong. It was a seminar in the Vigyan Bhavan, where he had put all major joint secretaries, directors from the entire government of India under one roof and tried to give them some kind of an insight into what is space technology about. And in the end, he said that the most important thing is to reduce the space between the space and make it to the common man, something like that. I don't recollect the exact words, but what it primarily implied was that reduce the technology to a common man and to make it a revolution for that person, which means that how do you create a demand where he's hungry to poach into your satellite data information resources and he uses it. I think we have the satellites, we have the technology. Yes, we have limitations in terms of the capacity in terms of constellations that we have. They have limited revisit cycles, and the assets available itself are not in the quantity that would be able to give me very rapid updates of information. But I think the basics are already there. And in case we put our heads together, COVID has given us a lot of opportunity actually. Yes, we are facing challenges both in terms of human lives and people getting infected. We've had a very severe lockdown condition. We're emerging from it. But I think that rather than looking at what has not happened or what has not happened, has been happening, but what can be done, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. And here, what's very important is in terms of the data policies that you were talking about. I recall my days when I was drafting the national geospatial policy along with a team of DSC in 2015 and 16 period, and we came out with the first draft, and thereafter a lot of sessions. A lot of emphasis was placed upon accessibility, affordability, and easy availability of data. And after that, we've had discussions with various agencies which either own data or control data. And what I found in my interactions is that there is a lot of mindset challenge with respect to opening of data. And I think that should change with the Prime Minister's call. And I'm very glad that the government has finally taken the call to unleash this data. But it will be important that when this data is released, it is released in a manner in which it can make a measurable difference. It is really democratized and it is made available to the startups where they can thereafter leverage this information, this innovation potential and develop technologies which would bring out the true innovation potential of this country. I think it's a history in making. In case we can get our act together, we could have some very interesting startups coming in. If I read the narrative that you're giving us, you had made a mention of how the NRIs and the migrants and the agri-tech and the challenges that exist, how do we connect the dots? So I think this is the time to do that. And for that, uh, we need uh, we need to put our mind first that yes, I'm interested in solving this problem. If you see that I have to solve the data,
Mhm.
it will not work. If I have to solve the problem and then I start working backwards, that what is required to solve this problem, then we'll come to a lot of solutions.
Yeah.
And that would also require
Yeah.
uh, a lot of thought process to go from the BFSI sector into believing this technology and using this technology much more effectively than it has been doing so far, so that
Yeah.
they are also able to predict and understand the problem. And even at the farmer level, how we take this technology in a very simplified manner, considering that many of them don't even have a smartphone. So how do we enable
Yeah.
the village
Yeah. Yeah.
panchayats? How do we take it there? And I would say that
Hmm.
here, probably we could use the power of the NSS and the NCC by educating our kids in
Yeah.
those and using them as your brand ambassadors to probably reach out to the panchayats and giving them
Yeah.
basically understand that there's something like a S for a satellite and it can do this for you, and this is where you demand it. So I think these are my opening comments, and then we can take it further.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Satyam. My next question to Marco, and as Marco has highlighted, that Marco, India has small and fragmented farms, unlike a lot of Western countries, countries that are west of India, that have big farms, big farmlands, which are farmlands used for or grown with a commercial intent, large, and grown via businesses. Our farmers in India, they rotate crops every season, and we are on top of that a price-sensitive market. So, what sort of approach satellite companies would want to take? Satellite companies like Satellogic would want to take in India, and how much can Indian businesses, agri-businesses, benefit from Satellogic?
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is an interesting challenge indeed. One thing that any country, all countries have in common today, and most of businesses, not only agriculture, is that most businesses are becoming information businesses in a way. Agriculture producers 400 years ago had to manage their business based on information, whether it would rain or it would not rain, or the time of the season they should harvest, and this kind of thing. Now, an agriculture producer today needs to use much more information in order, if he wants to compete, if he wants to produce sustainably, right? So everything is, the demand for information is independent of the size of the lands and so forth, and this is affecting everybody. But the challenge is still making good use of this information. Now, the other part is that Earth observation has my sensation is has failed these businesses. If you go today, we were mentioning right now that some farmers don't even know what a satellite is. And some farmers know what a satellite is and they know what imagery can do, but still they don't use it. And there's many reasons behind that. Reasons like the fact that the imagery can be expensive, that for you having one shot of your farm a year is a good descriptive information of your situation, but it's not something that you can action upon, that you cannot take decisions upon that. So I think that the main challenges for companies like us is, number one would be affordability, which is key to democratizing this data. If you can show that the information is useful, and if you can sell it, not 20% less, 100 times less. This is democratizing. 20% is nothing, right? If you can sell it for 100 times less price point, then you have a chance of succeeding. But also the frequency is key. Here we are monitoring events that are not static. Agriculture changes day by day, raindrop by raindrop. So we need to allow for if we want agriculture producers to use that information, we need to provide that information, if not every day, every week. So they see what the consequences of their actions are. This is another reason I think that the usability of Earth observation data has been low. And of course, usability. We need to understand the kind of tools that these producers have in order for them to to find it useful. Right now, there's a huge gap. You know, if I said, okay, you're going to download this GeoTIFF with this satellite image and then open your own geographic information system so you can use it, that's equivalent to saying you're never going to use my information. So we need to make it usable so in order to reach, and in particular in India, in order to reach that broad range of producers, you were talking about, you were also asking me about the businesses in India. There will be a key role for intermediate businesses. Satellogic is not planning in building a sales force that will go and knock at the door of every farm in India. We will never be able to do that, right? So we really need to partner with the businesses that have this access and see how this information can be bundled within their value proposition. You know, the people who sell seeds might want to have information about the optimal time for planting those seeds. The people that sell fertilizers would want to provide also that kind of information, and so forth. We need to see how we bundle that information with the suppliers of those smaller businesses.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. Satyamji, I come back to you. There are 4 or 5 big ministries in India who have huge land parcels or who take care of huge land parcels in India. Number 1 is the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. Number 2 is Ministry of Railways. Then you have Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. You have Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Each of them have their own each of them have carved out their own niches in terms of using satellite data. Do you believe satellites should only be in the custody of ISRO, or in the future, each of these ministries will be able to develop payloads for themselves depending on their necessities? And would that be possible? And if possible, what are the timeframes that you are looking at?
Okay, what I say will be my personal view based on my understanding of the ecosystem as an expert, and it's not a government view. So, and I like to speak my view. Okay, so I feel that areas where there are critical technologies to be handled or there are strategic requirements to be handled, there the most essential component of that component should be handled by the government. And then the rest should be put into the private domain. We can have our, so let me give you an example. Let's say my ministry, we have about 1,800 sites where work is happening, which means that if I do a satellite-based monitoring of what's happening on ground, I need 1,800 shots at geographically distributed locations per month. We spend about 1.7 lakh crore per year on national highways, which is just 2% of the road network, which carries about 40 to 50% of the national cargo. That is the kind of potential. Now, if I was to take 1,800 shots, the whole global capacity may not be able to do it. So that is the amount of potential you have. And why it is important is because once you start doing that, you start bringing a more amount of transparency in the system improves, the quality and the payouts, each project could be 300, 400, 500 crores. So unfortunately what's happened is that in India, we have not opened our eyes from the economic impact of the geospatial data and what it can do to save money to the government and bring efficiency and bring higher productivity to the government. Rather, we have seen, oh, this image is worth this much. So this is one point. The second point is that if there's a digital globe there, the kind of data requirements that exist and the kind of expansion programs, the largest national highway program is happening in India. I think the largest smart city program will be happening in India. The largest water related programs will be happening in India. If you see our present government's focus, and it's a consistent focus, the very, very basic but very important infrastructure related projects. Now, each of these infrastructure requires a huge amount of investment, which means that you need to be having a capability to measure, monitor, analyze, manage, and predict based on a data. but where is the data? So if we were to create, say, one or two major private conglomerates who are able to put satellites in place, let it be on a lease, but you own it, and then you set up IT programs or IT platforms where this technology is allowed to be democratized. You put it as a service. You put innovators on the job. Here's the data. You play around on this platform. Let it be a cloud-based platform. And thereafter, take out products, have very minimal charges for giving it to the people. Remember, India is a land of masses, so earn by the masses, not by making it something so exclusive that even you and me can't afford it. There are students there. Software is so costly. Offer the software as a service. Say that if you create value, it will be free for you. That is a challenge for you. Give it as a credit card, right? Give him that credit. Students' credit cards, 3 years. This software is free. After that, this will be on yours if you produce 2 algorithms. So use the brain power of the Indians and put it back into technology development. Create data majors in this country. Put security regulations. I understand the security regulations because I'm part of that system. I've understood the problem is. And that can be handled. That can be handled electronically today. And the same can also meet the strategic requirements of the system. So the data may be downloaded at a certain place. You can have your own people who are sitting there and they can monitor whether electronically things are happening correctly. But you unleash the technology to, for people to use it. Similarly, there is terabytes, maybe terabytes of ISRO data which is lying. It's legacy data. Unleash it. 5.8 meter data itself is such a value. Last 10 years, 20 years data, you give it to the innovators, they'll come out with such fantastic predictability patterns. That is what can earn value. So this is the way.
Thank you.
So you need to unleash the policy, but effectively where it is going to impact. Make it like what he's mentioned, affordability to the people.
Affordability.
Exactly. That is where you have to reach to that man, and simple affordability and simple consumption has to be as simple as possible that that man can understand. Invest in those technologies. I think that is where
Thank you.
you'll be able to make a difference.
I'll move on to my last question, which is for Marco. Marco, your company Satellogic has been offering hyperspectral imaging data for agricultural monitoring to a lot of geographies of this world. What sort of customers have you had in the past, and how did their needs differ from each other?
Okay. Yes, hyperspectral imaging is a good example of potential game changers that commercial, private sector companies will bring, with their need of innovating. So I guess everybody's aware of what a hyperspectral image is. I always call it, it's like having color superpowers. Wherever we see two green fields, and for us, they're indistinguishable from one another. A hyperspectral image will show you thousands, if not millions, of different shades of green. And by looking at those shades, you can look at excess irrigation or lack of minerals or health issues, hydric stress, whatever you want to look into. In water, you can see pollution or the presence of certain minerals and so forth. So we decided very early on to make a bet for commercial hyperspectral imagery. There's very little hyperspectral imagery in general. This, which is very promising, we've already worked in the case of water pollution. We've worked in the case of agriculture and forestry, for instance, for having more accurate classification of different types of species, or for detecting hydric stress, using it as an additional variable for detecting hydric stress. But there's also a disadvantage that happens with any new sensor. It's a new source of data. You don't have enough historical information in order to, if you're working with machine learning models and so forth, you need some training information in order to train those models. If you're working with only manually, you need to understand what you're seeing, because you want to ground your decisions on something very concrete. So one of the first steps we've taken has been towards working with the research community in general to give away this kind of data to understand better what opportunities there can be with this data. So we understand, I think here we fully agree that a healthy growth on the side of entrepreneurship, startups, research and development universities around these new data sources will be good for everybody, good for the community, for the society, for the use of the data, and for ourselves. We've started mainly with agriculture and forestry, as I mentioned in the examples. We believe there's going to be a lot of growth on the side of government and environment eventually. For instance, we have a ton of environmental policies that are very difficult to implement because you cannot prove whether they're being implemented or not. Hyperspectral data can provide a tool to understand really if those policies are being implemented or not. So regulatory compliance would be the application in this case.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Marco.